Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my new video where we are going to be covering how to counter Sett. This is going to be a new format for my channel. If you're new to my channel, my name is Lofit. I do educational content, do tips videos, guide videos, and I also stream right here on YouTube. So how we are going to effectively do this is I'm going to break it up into 4 different sections that are going to be time-stamped at the top of the page if you want to skip around to different parts or if you want to skip this intro. First up, we're going to go into champion select, where we're going to go over champions that do really well into Sett and champions that really struggle going into Sett. Next up, we're going to go into laning phase, how to take advantage of his weaknesses and stay away from his strengths in laning phase. Next up, itemizations and runes that you can look to use to effectively deal and counter with Sett. Lastly, finally, we are going to be going over team fights and how to deal with him in those. If there's a particular champion you want to see in this type of format, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, as well as your own tips. If you know how to counter Sett and you found a certain strategy that really works, I would love to see those type of comments down below, as well as if you guys have any questions for me. I am going to link my Discord in the pinned comments down below if you want to ask me any direct questions, as well as you can hit that subscribe button and the bell button if you would like to chat with me when I go live on my stream. And with all that out of the way, let's get into the first section. Alright, and getting into the first section, I want to cover a couple of different champions that do exceedingly well into him, and then a couple of champions that might do very poorly. We're going to start with the champions that do well. Right now, Soraka is an absolute menace in these solo lanes, and she does exceedingly well into Sett, as well as the other top 3 champions. All 3, Soraka, Cassiopeia, and Singed, are able to speed up themselves, and they're able to slow down Sett. So these characteristics are exceedingly good when they are looking to harass Sett and deal with him in lane. 2 champions that I think I want to give a really big shout out to, and I think are exceedingly good picks into Sett, are both Kayle, who saw some pro play as a counter pick to Sett, and Kled. What they provide is percentage HP damage that is exceedingly good into Sett, because Sett likes to stack a lot of HP to get a large shield and a lot of stagger for more W damage on the haymakers. So having champions with percentage HP is extremely effective. Next up, they have a lot of consistent damage. So anytime people have shields, it is really good to have consistent damage, because the shield doesn't really matter. You're not this champion that relies on a lot of bursts like Zed, and then they do their bursts into the shield and then they're completely useless after. So consistent damage is great against champions that are really heavily reliant on shield, like Sett, like Karma. Finally, they have the mobility to deal with Sett. Kled is able to E through the Sett when he is looking to use his haymaker, and the Kayle is able to control distance with her W movement speed increase, as well as the slow with the E, as well as Kled being very burst resistant, which is great against Sett, as he does like to do a lot of bursts with his W combo with his E and his Q. Being burst resistant with the dismount mechanic, and sometimes Sett isn't going to have enough damage to really work through that dismounted state. Those 2 are my picks of Kayle and Kled. I think are just great picks into Sett if you are not willing to just be a meta whore right now and just really dominate a lot of people with Soraka. I think that's the #1 choice if you are looking to counter Sett. Okay, next up, we're going to go into a couple of champions that Sett does exceedingly well into. And first up, Jace is going to struggle a lot. Now, there is a pretty big reason that is not really solely on kits, and that is that Sett is just so much easier to execute than Jace. I think Jace can have a decent laning phase because he has percentage HP damage, he has a decent amount of consistent damage, and he can control spaces, but Sett is just so much easier to execute, both in team fights, laning phase, and all of that jazz, that is hard for Jaces to do exceedingly well into them. As you can see, the top 3 champions that Sett does extremely well into, almost having 60% win ratio into, they are all very hard to execute champions. Also, champions that rely on base HP pools is where Sett is going to really do well as champions that are very strong with all-ins and are looking to consistently all-in, like Aurelia, Aatrox, Riven, and Trogath. Sett is going to do well into these champions because he has percentage HP damage to shred them down, as well as he's able to really get those really easy face breakers off when he is looking to do that. So you want to stay away from these champions, as Sett does exceedingly well into them. And that will wrap up kind of my do's and don'ts in the champion select against Sett. Alright, and getting into the laning phase section, we're going to cover a couple of different things that are really important to understand when you are playing against Sett. First up, if you're playing a champion that is looking to control the zone and really keep Sett at a range and do a bit of damage and maybe slow him and kite him out and not really play into his kit, say you're playing something like a Kale, you're looking to really use your Q at an opportune moment, you can always look and see when the Sett is looking to go in on you is when they are using their knuckle down. What this does is it provides him an increased amount of movement speed toward enemy champions. So this is when a lot of Setts are looking to engage because they're getting that increased movement speed. When you see Sett's hands glowing and this little bit of a trail behind his hands is when he's looking to engage. This is when you want to use your slow on the enemy Sett, as this is going to make it so he is not going to be able to engage on you. So if you're your Kale, for example, you'd want to use your Q slow as soon as you see him running towards you with glowing fists, as he is a little bit of a Dragon Ball Z character. Next up, something you really want to understand when you're playing against Sett in the laning phase is he is a lot stronger when he is around minions. If he doesn't have a minion to proc his Facebreaker on or a secondary enemy target, all he can get is a bit of a knock up and a little bit of a slow after the target gets knocked up for 0.5 seconds. So if you can, stay away from minions that are going to allow him to stun you, and make sure that you think of him a little bit like Yasuo and how he is a bit stronger when he is around minion waves. The next thing that I think is exceedingly important to talk about, and where I've actually seen a lot of pro players struggle. I watch a lot of pro play, and Sett has been picked a couple of times, and people have made the mistake of trying to tower dive Sett, which is such a poor idea. His whole kit is just built around punishing people if they overextend, and he is able to, first of all, suppressing people under the tower while they are taking tower aggro is just such a really punishing thing, as well as his ability to shield off the burst and you trying to burst him out before the tower does too much damage to you, as well as getting a stun and a airborne. Even the pull in can be exceedingly effective because it will allow for an additional tower shot. So if there's ever an allied jungler that is looking to really punish the Sett and you don't think you have enough burst to kill him under the tower, ping him off, because this is where Sett can punish a lot of people in tower dive, similar to something like a Mordekaiser and how he is exceedingly hard to punish under the tower. So maybe if you have something like a classic Renekton Elise and you know your damage thresholds and you know you can kill him, that is the only time I'd recommend tower diving him. Maybe other thing that I think is really important to understand when you are playing against Sett, and maybe you're not looking to tower dive him, but you're maybe looking to punish him a little bit when he's CSing under tower and you're a ranged champion, is do not fall prey to this combo when they're playing Sett, and that is them queuing, flashing behind you, and then ultimating you under the tower. So you have to be careful with Sett being under the tower, similar to something like a Shen that can look to taunt you under tower and make you take additional damage. So these are kind of my tips that you really want to look to take advantage of when you are playing against Sett in the laning phase. And just a quick review, glowing fist means he's looking to run at you, use your slows then. He is stronger around minions with his Facebreaker, allowing him to get a stun. Do not try and tower dive him, he can punish you quite hard, and be careful being too close to the tower, as he can keep you under there quite quickly, and he can flash behind you and R you into tower and punish you quite heavily. So if you have your own tips for laning phase, I'd love to hear those thoughts down below, and let's get into the next section. All right, and getting into the itemization that can be extremely good into Sett. First up, a Sett as a champion really struggles to take away spell shields on targets without using a large part of his kit. So things like Banshee's Veil and Edge of Night can be exceedingly effective into Sett, because he's going to have to use one of his bigger cooldowns of either his Facebreaker or his W to proc that off, and it's going to really heavily discourage him from using his ultimate to get on top of you. Next up, we are going to cover a really important item that I think is great for any type of mage users, and that is Zhonya's. It's great ability because Sett is going to really look to try and burst out a particular champion with his ultimate, and then taking advantage of the slow that comes off of it to really beat them up with his Qs and his W and his E. So using items with spell shields and burst prevention on things like Zhonya's are going to be exceedingly effective. Now obviously he does a lot of AD damage, so armor is going to be quite effective into him. Stacking too much health and going too heavily into bruiser builds of only Black Cleaver and Titanic and Sterix can play into a little bit into Sett's hands because he has percentage HP damage on an exceedingly short cooldown on his Q, so making sure you take advantage of that. Next up, things that are exceedingly good against Sett are movement speed items that are going to allow you to really kite him out in a effective way, and there are a bunch of different ways you can look to stay at a decent range against him, going things like Dead Man's Plate, Twin Shadows if you're a mage. Maybe if he's looking to burst you out, Spellbinders can be a great way to kite him out, as well as getting early boots in laning phase can be quite effective when you're playing against Sett, as things like boost of swiftness can be great to deal with those slows that are coming out of his E if he only gets a knock-up, or his R post suppression is a very, very heavy slow. So making sure to keep him at a distance with increased movement speed, burst prevention, and spell shields are really great items playing against Sett, and that will wrap up the item section. Alright, and jumping into just certain runes that I think are exceedingly effective when you're playing against things like Sett. First up, Legend Tenacity is going to be a great rune if you are going to be playing a fighter or a type of bruiser against him, because this is going to allow you to really deal a lot better with the stun that he's going to be able to throw out and the different slows. Next up, a great rune if you're playing something that's maybe a little bit squishy against him, maybe you're playing something like a Quinn, Teemo, or Jace against him. Cut Down can be exceedingly effective because he's going to build a lot of HP. You know that this cut down is going to be highly effective, as it is based off of who, if your target has a higher HP threshold than you. Next up, things like Phase Rush for mages can be exceedingly effective, as well as things like Nimbus Cloak and Celerity. So in general, what you're looking at in your runes is you want to have movement speed, mobility type of runes can be exceedingly effective, as well as things that are able to really nullify the amount of CC that is being thrown out at you. So make sure that you are using these type of runes when you are playing against Sett. Also, Sett is a little bit of a combo champion with his EQW. Using things like Bone Plating can be effective for that short combo that he is looking to take advantage of, as well. Again, doing things like Unflinching can be quite effective, giving you tenacity. These are going to be my tips for runes. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you have your own rune setup that you like to choose, as well as if you have any questions for me for like a particular champion setup. You can ask me down below, like something like, oh, I try and play Nasus. Nasus is my one trick. What kind of rune should I build against Sett? I'd love to help you out in that respect. And that will wrap up this section. Alright, and getting into the final section of how to deal with Sett in team fights. I just want to give you guys a couple of tips and how you can really look to shut him down. First up, he is so exceedingly punishing against grouped up targets. If you didn't know, when in general, if there's an ability based champion on the enemy team, you do not want to be in a grouped up situation, particularly in this formation. This is the absolute Sett's wet dream, is a high HP target in the front with a bunch of squishies in the back line that are grouped up. So if you didn't know, the showstopper gets an additional HP percentage scaling damage based off the grab target's bonus health. So if you have something like a Cho'Gath or a Garen or something with a shitload of bonus health in the front line that he can drag into the back line and do a lot of AoE damage to, this is going to be absolutely devastating for team fights. So make sure that you are really not grouping up, because this is really where Sett can thrive quite heavily, hitting a bunch of you with the slow from the R into the E into the W, doing a bunch of AoE damage. So really try and stay away from heavily grouped targets. Next up, Sett struggles against consistent damage and can really thrive and do a lot of damage to your team if he is the focus of a lot of burst, if he's not getting consistently CC'd and he's really hyper tanky. So if you're playing something like a Zed or a Fizz or something with a lot of burst, maybe something like a Syndra, making sure to focus the backline targets and targets that are a lot more susceptible to damage is going to be a great way to play out the team fights. Also, when you see the Sett's W is down, this is a great time to take advantage of his weakness. This is a huge window of power, is when he has a lot of stagger up and he has his W up. This is when he can really punish you guys in team fights. So keep an eye on the haymaker and its usage. You can look to punish him after he uses his haymaker. Now, they did nerf the cooldowns a little bit, but it still is going to have a relatively short cooldown in late game team fights of around 8 seconds, maybe 7 or 6, depending on CDR. So making sure that you play around the haymaker, do not be grouped up, and taking full advantage of slowing him down again with the laning tips of seeing when he has his glowing Q fist can be a great time to slow him and stop the engage. These are my tips for team fighting. This is going to wrap up all my tips to play again, how to play against Sett. Let me know how you think and how you like or dislike the new format. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and your feedback on it. As always, guys, take it easy.